Έτσι και κανένας αριστερούλης διεθνούς γνώσης παραχτυπήσει το πόδι του σε καμιά κοντρόλα, γίνεται πρώτο θέμα σε όλα τα ελληνικά μέσα ενημέρωσης, δυστυχώς. Εν πάση περιπτώσει. Μάλιστα, τελευταία έγραφα και λέγω ότι δεν καταλαβαίνω πώς υπάρχει τέτοια αιμονή σε αριστερές αντιλήψεις στην Ελλάδα. Όταν οπουδήποτε έγινε προσπάθεια να γίνουν πράξεις αυτές οι αντιλήψεις, οδηγηθήκαμε σε αδιέξοδο και πολλά από αυτά τραγικά αδιέξοδα. Εν τούτης εκεί. Είναι αυτό που λέμε άγωνη γραμμή, Άγιος Κήρυκος, Καρλόβας και πάει λέγοντα. Να ευχαριστήσω λοιπόν όλους εδώ για την εδώ παρουσία. Εγώ δεν θα σας κουράσω άλλο. Απλώς να σας πω ότι την επόμενη Πέμπτη, γιατί κάθε Πέμπτη ουσιαστικά κάνουμε εμείς εδώ τις εκδηλώσεις μας, σήμερα έγινε Τρίτη λόγω ιδιαίτερων συνθηκών. Την επόμενη Πέμπτη θα έχουμε τον κύριο Γιώργο Πίτρο, τον ομότιμο καθηγητή του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών, ο οποίος θα έχει ένα ιδιαίτερα ενδιαφέρον θέμα να αναπτύξει, η επόμενη μεγάλη οικονομική κρίση. Αν η επόμενη δεν είναι μεγάλη, σκεφτείτε τι είναι αυτή και τι θα μας επιφυλάξει η τύχη για το μέλλον. Άρα όσοι από εσάς θέλετε να είστε παρόντες την άλλη Πέμπτη, καλοδεχούμενοι. Παρακαλώ, ο κ. Γεωργός μας κάνει την πρώτη μία εισήγηση για τον ομιλητή και στη συνέχεια ο κ. Brook.
Thank you very much for coming here. You're really, I cannot say enough about how thankful I am that you all responded to the call to come to this lecture. So I would like to ask a question to start with. Does anyone here like being a slave? No? Does anyone here like being forced to do things under the threat of violence? No? Great. So this is the right crowd for this lecture. So before I begin my introduction of our speaker tonight, I would like to go through a few procedural colors with you. So would you please switch off your mobile phones and turn them to silent as a respectful speaker. And if you could be patient with your questions, there will be a question and answer session at the end. So please keep notes of your questions and you'll get an opportunity to ask those. And if some of you like to mix intellectual stimulation with fun, after the event we'll be going down to some bar or somewhere to eat, so please feel free to join us. Now I would like to talk to you a bit about the Liberty Forum of Greece. It was founded by a group of freedom-loving individuals who spotted a gap in Greek think tanks. They saw that there was a lack of publications that are free market-oriented. There was a lack of think tanks that would advocate laissez-faire capitalism, that would advocate free trade, that would advocate individual rights, and classical liberalism, and an open society. And so our mission is to advance and promote exactly those ideas. We want to create a wave of people that understand freedom and promote it to whoever they know. So this is why we do all these events. We hold lectures or panel discussions or debates. Sometimes we hold book presentations every first Tuesday of the month at a bookstore called the Free Thinking Zone. And we've recently done some discussions about the role of women in the economy. We've done a discussion about entrepreneurship and freedom, and lots of other interesting things. I'm sure you will really enjoy to attend, and I'll be very happy to see you there. We also did an event last year, or a couple of years ago, in honor of Ayn Rand, which is my favorite topic. And it was also the time I last visited as well the Liberty Forum. Our aim at the Liberty Forum is not to force you to agree with us. I know there's differences between our opinions. We want to capture your interest and to provoke you to re-examine your thoughts. Now, with regards to Ayn Rand, I know that she's not very well known in Greece, so I'll give a very brief introduction to Ayn Rand. She was born in 1905 in Russia. She was born under a different name. The Russian Revolution started, and her family faced a lot of difficulties. So later on in her life, she managed to escape the communist regime and moved to the US, where she changed her name to Ayn Rand. She started working as a playwright at first, but then what she noticed in her life there is that there was the US culture was shifting in the same way. It was following the footsteps of what she had already seen happening in communist Russia. So she decided that the best way to act against this was to use the medium that she knew how to use best. That was writing. So she wrote some very famous novels, Anthem, which is going to be published by the Liberty Forum of Greece in Greek in February on Ayn Rand's birthday. The Fountainhead, which has already been published in Greek as Κοντά στον ουρανό, With the Living, which is a Mrs. Odoni in Greek, and it's on sale there. And also her biggest and most famous book is Atlas Shrugged, which has been published in Greek as O Atlas Επαναστάτησε. And then again you can buy the book there at the table that Free Thinking Zone have brought here. So we come to thank them for this contribution. Now, I found out about Ayn Rand at the age of 27, and it really changed my life. So until that point, I thought, okay, I'm a free market guy. I understand why I like free markets, because they work. But I also thought, you know, it's a necessary evil. It's something that works, but there's many negative connotations around it that I still was skeptical about. And then I read Ayn Rand, and this is what Ayn Rand offered me, was the moral case for capitalism, for free market capitalism. And this is very crucial in order to win the hearts and the minds of people, rather than just bore them with endless statistics like economists tend to do. She does it in a magnificent way in her novels. Then I would like to get to our speaker. Our speaker is Yaron Brook, Dr. Yaron Brook. He's the director of the Ayn Rand Institute. I met him in London. He was giving a lecture at the university, and I attended that lecture. His speech was amazing. It really showed me that there is a way to sell free market capitalism to people without being boring, and that is an amazing achievement. I wasn't used to that, so I thought, okay, I've got to get this guy to Greece. I've got to bring him so that my fellow Greek citizens listen to him, and maybe they will get the same ideas as I got when I listened. So, I have a little anecdote to tell you as well before I finish, and this kind of shows how relevant Ayn Rand's and Yaron's ideas can be to the common man, as opposed to an intellectual or a kind of economist, PhD in economics or something. On my way back from the event, I took a taxi. It was a bit late, and I had a few drinks as well, and it's a bit of a way from my home where the lecture was. So I took the taxi, and we were driving, and I was already fueled by the enthusiasm that Yaron had in his discussion. So I gave to the taxi driver the speech of my life. I don't know what I was talking about, but I kept talking to him about free markets and liberty, freedom, everything, all of that. So we got to my place, and the taxi meter said 38 pounds. So he tells me, don't worry, just give me 30. Now I thought, that can't be true. I'm not hearing well. So I took out my wallet and I took £20 note and 2 10s, I hand it over to him. He says, no. Just give me 30. I don't want 38. I told you, take the 10 back. I said, why? Why you didn't? Because I really enjoyed your lecture, he said. You were amazing. You gave me a fantastic speech. It was a pleasure to meet you. So, please, give a warm welcome to Dr. Yaron Brook and pay attention because who knows, maybe we'll be able to save some money on the taxi pack.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? I'd rather not stand over there and use the microphone. So, everybody here in the back? We're good? Good. Thank you, George. Thank you for sponsoring today's event. I disagree with one thing George said. I would actually have loved it to have some leftists in the audience. It would have made the evening much more interesting and much more fun. And maybe we would have changed some minds. I have a feeling you all agree with me already, so this is somewhat preaching to the choir. You know, all of us, or many of us, who believe in free markets, who believe in capitalism, who believe in kind of economic liberalism, we face a real challenge. We face a real puzzle, if you will, a brain puzzle, a teaser. By the way, there's a seat up front here, and there's a seat in the second row. So, this is the puzzle. Capitalism works. Everywhere free markets are being tried, they generate a higher standard of living, they generate wealth, they generate prosperity. Poor people are better off under capitalism than any other system in the world. It works. And we know it works because in history it's worked. Whenever it's been tried in history, in the United States in the 19th century, in Great Britain in the 19th century, in Hong Kong in the 20th century, it's been an incredible success. People have thrived. Individuals have done phenomenally well. They've created wealth, technology, standard of livings go up. And again, the poor, which everybody seems obsessed about, and we can talk about this obsession with the poor, they do better under capitalism than any other system. And I dare anybody to show me statistics that show otherwise. It's just not true. 250 years ago, how many people in the world were poor? Everybody, except a small percentage of aristocrats who exploited everybody else and stole their wealth and kept everybody poor. By the standards of 250 years ago, how many people are poor in the West today? None. None. And why? Because of markets. Because of capitalism. Because of the wealth created under whatever amount of free markets we've allowed to exist. Yes, we try to redistribute it, and we get into trouble, and we revert to free markets, and we create a little bit more wealth, and then the socialists come to power again, and they redistribute it, and then we free up the economy a little bit. And this is the question we have. We see it. We see it every single time, with every single experiment. You know, just look at UK with the Thatcher Revolution. Wealth was created, standard of living went up, life became better. They can complain as much as they want, but the statistics, the data is there. So capitalism works, free markets are good, most people are better off, and yet, we move away from them. We reject them. In the entire West, we are moving away from capitalism. And even if we move a little bit towards it, it's usually only temporary. And let me just tell you, because I know you guys in Greece are in a little different situation than we are in America. But America is not a capitalist country. No country in the world today is a capitalist country. They're all mixtures. There's some freedom, and there's a lot of government. And in America, there's a lot of government. And that portion of the economy is growing. Government is growing in America. The percentage of GDP that the government spends is growing. Dollar spending is growing. Regulations are growing. Redistribution of wealth is growing, in spite of the fact that we know that free markets work. Because we have eyes. All you need is eyes in my view. All you need is a minimal knowledge of history. And if you have questions about any particulars, ask me in the Q&A. I'd be happy to answer any of the particulars. I'm going to take off my jacket. We know, because if you study history, it's right there in front of us. We know, because how many of you have ever been to Hong Kong? Okay. This is my recommendation. Once in your life, make it to Hong Kong. Hong Kong 75 years ago was a little fishing village in the middle of nowhere. It had no natural resources. It had nothing. And then the British came along, and all the British did was establish property rights. They protected property rights. And what happened? People from all over Asia came to this middle of nowhere rock. And they established a thriving city. Skyscrapers put New York today to shame. They are so beautiful and new and magnificent. 7.5 million people live in that fishing village today. The GDP per capita, a measure of individual wealth, not a very good measure, but a measure nonetheless, is equal to the United States of America. In 75 years, with nothing, no natural resources, no subsidies, no help from anybody, a minimal safety net. People swam there, people got on boats there, people went there because Hong Kong gave them freedom, gave them opportunities. They got to keep what they made. They got to be in a free market. And when we say free market, what do we mean? Free of what? Free of intervention, free of coercion, free of regulation, free of government control. Where voluntary exchange, the state does not get involved in the middle between voluntary exchange. So in my view, and I'm willing to be challenged in the Q&A, but in my view, the evidence is overwhelming for the success of capitalism, for the success of free markets. And you can see it, again, ask me in the Q&A, we can go over this, because I don't want to get, because we can do 3 hours just on the history of capitalism easily, right? The question is, why is everybody so resistant to these facts? Because they are facts. They are reality. And yet nobody wants to see them. Nobody wants to acknowledge them. Nobody wants to accept them. You show them to people, and they look at it, and they say, no, that's not there. They ignore reality. I'll give you a little example of this. This is true of economics generally. If you know basic economics, then it should be pretty self-evident, for example, that a minimum wage increases what? Unemployment. It's basic supply and demand. Right? When you have a good and you price it above its natural price, what happens? Some people can't afford to buy it anymore. Well, if you price labor above its natural price, some people can't afford to hire it. And therefore, some people are unemployed that would otherwise be employed if the minimum wage were lower. Who gets unemployed under the minimum wage? Rich kids? Poor, unskilled, young kids. They're the ones who get unemployed. And this is basic economics. This is not hard. This any student in economics should get, right? And you teach it. You go into a class and you teach minimum wage causes unemployment about poor, young kids, right? Unskilled labor. And what does this do? This prevents them from getting a job. So maybe the minimum wage is $10, they can only produce at $5, so nobody hires them. So since nobody hires them, they never have a job at $5, they never develop the skills to make $10 or $12 or $100 or $1,000 an hour. And therefore they're institutionalized into poverty. What basically the minimum wage is a way to make sure that poor people stay poor. And you can show this economically, and you show it on the board, and all the students go, yeah, we get it. Supply and demand, this is simple, right? And then you ask them, the next class, a day later, you ask them, well, how many of you fall minimum wage? And almost every hand goes up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The facts don't matter. the theory, the science, doesn't matter. And the question is why? There's something in us. There's something deeply ingrained in our culture. Now, funnily enough, not in ancient Greek culture, but certainly in modern Greek culture, there's something deeply ingrained in us that hates capitalism. We hate free markets. We hate it instinctually. We don't even think about it. And we know every financial crisis that happens, who's to blame? Before we get the data, before we do the research, before we know what happened, who's to blame? Markets. Capitalism and usually bankers, and it used to be Jewish bankers, but that's politically incorrect, so we don't say that anymore, we just say bankers. Right? Bankers are always to blame. Capitalism's always to blame. Free markets are always to blame. Now, when we look at the data later on, we discover it's not so simple. It's usually the central bank's fault, it's usually the government's fault, but that we look later on, we find out. But immediately, the immediate response is, it has to be the markets. The markets failed, the markets are to blame, capitalism's to blame, because we so hate it, we so despise it, that it just comes up. And this financial crisis, the later financial crisis, is a perfect example of this. People tell me that capitalism caused the financial crisis in the United States. Because in 2007, we had free markets, and they failed. That's a joke, right? 2007, who had free markets? Banking in the United States is the most regulated business in the world, in the US, right? And it was the most regulated business in the US in 2007. Mortgage business, the mortgage business, right, was the second most regulated business in the United States in 2007. And it failed. The housing market, not one of the most, but a very regulated business, it failed. The three most regulated businesses in the United States failed, and we blame the free market. What free market? There was no free market. Now, we can argue about what exactly caused it, what combination, but you cannot, in logic, in reality, you cannot blame capitalism. There was no capitalism. Do you know that every bank in America was regulated by 5 different regulatory agencies? Every decision a bank in America made had to be approved by a government bureaucrat. Every single one. Do you know that at JP Morgan, the big American bank, every day, over 129 government officials go to work at JP Morgan. They have offices at the corporate headquarters of JP Morgan, and government bureaucrats from the regulatory agencies work there every single day. Free markets? This is complete control. I mean, to even call banks private banks is dubious. How private are they? Private, you're supposed to make, when you have something that's yours, you're supposed to be able to make decisions about what to do with it, independent of some bureaucrat. But here the bureaucrat has to sign off on everything you do. 129 people go to work at JP Morgan who are employed by the United States government. Remember that. When any time somebody tells you America is a capitalist country of free market. Every one of the big banks has these people in the bank, employed right there. And yet, now my theory is, I can give you my short version of the financial crisis, happened for 3 reasons. One, Federal Reserve kept interest rates below the rate of inflation for 2.5 years. We call that negative real rates of return. When you have negative real rates of return, you're giving an incentive for people to borrow money. Very simple. You're paying them to borrow money. Guess what everybody did in America? They borrowed money. Now, why did it all go into housing? Because in 1999, the Clinton administration decided that 70% of Americans should own houses. The Bush administration supported that. They told Freddie and Fannie and everybody else that they need to buy those mortgages and increase the percentage that they own. So there was massive subsidization of the mortgage market in the United States. At every level there's subsidization. At the tax level, at the repackaging level, when Freddie and Fannie buy the mortgages, at every level. I'm not going to get into all the details. Some massive subsidies for homeownership. What happens when you subsidize something? The price goes up. When the government is buying anything, the price goes up. Third, hazard, too big to fail. Deposit insurance. You tell bankers, You can take on as much risk as you want. If you gain, you get to keep the profits, and if you lose, we'll bail you up. Don't worry, be happy. Guess what they do? They take on lots of risk. And I can give you another 20 reasons why the banking system failed in the United States. All to do with regulations. All of them. And yet, the minute the crisis happened, what was the headline? Capitalism has failed. Free markets have failed. Banking. This is what happens when you allow banks to do whatever they want. What? Whatever they want. That's ridiculous. So what's going on? Why is it? What is driving this hatred? What is driving this instinctual response to capitalism, to free markets, to banks? Well, what is capitalism about? What are marketplaces about? What is the market about? Any market. What's it about? Why do people go to the market? Why do people sell? So why does Steve Jobs make these? Well, he's making it to make money. Make money for whom? For Steve Jobs, for Apple. Now, is it only about money? Why else does Steve Jobs make these? I mean, made. Unfortunately, he's not with us. Why did he make these? I mean, it's not only about money, right? I mean, how many of you go to work only for the money? Yeah, because he loves it, right? He's creative, he's innovative, he likes to see the product of his mind in reality. He enjoys it, he has fun. But making the iPhones is all about Steve Jobs. It's about Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs made this, not because he cares about me, not because he cares about any of you. He didn't wake up every morning and say, how can I maximize social utility? He didn't wake up every morning saying, how can I help my neighbor? He woke up every morning saying, how can I make the best, most beautiful product I can and make lots of money doing it? Steve Jobs was in this for himself. When I went to buy my first iPhone in 2008, the US economy was spiraling out of control, and I wanted to stimulate the US economy. So I went to buy the iPhone. Because I want to make sure there were jobs and people, right? I mean, that's why you go to the mall, you go shopping, because you want to help your fellow man. You want to make sure you buy into the Keynesian idea that if you shop, employment will increase and production will happen, and you care about Greece, so you shop. Now, of course not. Why do you go shopping? Why did I buy the iPhone? Because I needed it, because I thought it would be cool, because I wanted to make myself more productive, because I go to the mall because I want to wear nice clothes, because I enjoy it. Because I do it for whom? For me. The marketplace is a place where we go to pursue our self-interest. The marketplace is about self-interest. Now, this isn't new to me or to Ayn Rand. Adam Smith told us this in The Wealth of Nations, 1776. The baker doesn't bake the bread for you. He bakes the bread to make a living for himself. The guy who delivers the bread doesn't deliver it because he cares about you. He delivers the bread because he cares about himself, his family, the people he has to feed, the people he has to take care of. Markets are driven by self-interest. Self-interest is the driver of capitalism, the driver of free markets, the driver of all markets. And what are we being told about self-interest? Since we were this big, what did our parents tell us about self-interest? I can tell you what my mother told me, right? My mother's a good Jewish mother. And she told me, think of yourself last. She didn't mean this. Nobody ever means this stuff. But this is what's preached, and this is what goes into our psyche. Think of yourself last. Think of others first. What is, in our culture, nobility? What does virtue mean? What does goodness mean?
Altruism.
What's that?
Altruism.
Altruism. Altruism, by the way, is a term, just so we're clear, coined by Comte, the 19th century French philosopher, and it means not being nice to people, not being friendly, not opening doors. It means devoting your life to other people's well-being. It means becoming others' servant. If you think, when you help somebody, if you think, oh, I'm going to feel better because I helped them, it's not moral according to Comte. Right? So we've been taught that nobility, virtue, goodness are all about self-sacrifice and what we do for others. And the more we sacrifice for others, the more noble we become. Because if we help other people and we benefit at the same time, do we get moral credit for this in the culture we live in today? Do we consider, let's take an example, right? Bill Gates. Everybody know Bill Gates, Microsoft, right? Bill Gates made, I don't know, $70 billion for himself. How did he do that? How does any businessman make money? How do you make money in a market? You sell a product that people want for a price people are willing to pay for it. Why are they willing to pay that price? Why are they willing to pay $100 for a piece of Microsoft software? Because it's worth more, how much to them? More than $100. Otherwise they wouldn't bother to give up the $100. So the buyer of Microsoft product is what? Is better off because he's got something worth more than the $100 he gave up. Okay? And Microsoft is better off because they sold a product that's worth less to them than $100. The beauty of trade in a free market, uncoerced, voluntary trade, is that it is win-win. Both parties are better off, or at least that is their intention when they enter. You know, you can sometimes buy what's called a lemon, a bad product that you discover afterwards, but you enter the trade expecting gain, expecting to be better off. So Bill Gates made $70 billion. How much do you think we made? The world made off of Microsoft products? What's that? Many multiples of this. Trillions of dollars. The world is better off because of Microsoft by trillions of dollars. It's hard to calculate, but the world is a completely different place. Microsoft has made better almost every human being on the planet. Does Bill Gates get moral, ethical credit for changing everybody's life and making the world a better place? No, because he made money doing it. He made money doing it. Now, when did Bill Gates become a good guy? When he became a philanthropist. He left Microsoft, not making any more money, and now he's only going to devote to giving. Now, we still don't completely trust him. He's still not really a moral hero. Why? Because he seems like he's enjoying it. True. And he still lives in a big house and flies a private jet. So what would it take? What would it take to make Bill Gates a saint? I mean, I haven't talked to the Pope, so I don't want to talk to the Catholic religion. But what do you think would make Bill Gates a moral hero? He'd have to give it all away. He'd have to move into a tent. And if he could just bleed a little bit, just a little bit of blood, then we would all say, now none of us would want to be him. Remember, none of us want to be the saint. But we would say, wow, now that is moral. That is noble. We don't like it. We don't want to be it. But we think it's morally beautiful. Now that is sick. That is sick. That is a sick culture. A culture that says building something, creating something, improving the lives of everybody through trade, through voluntary transaction, that is barely, no nobility associated with that because it's for profit. But sacrifice yourself, swallow in the mud, show blood, suffer. Oh, that's beautiful, that's noble. I mean, think about it. Mother Teresa, who barely helped anybody, read her diary, barely helped anybody, is a saint, is a moral hero to all of us. Bill Gates, who made a gazillion times greater impact on the world, on poor people in the world, is nothing. Not on a moral perspective, nothing from a moral perspective. Now that is a morality that's killing us. It is killing us. That is the morality that doesn't accept capitalism. Because capitalism is about self-interest, and we're told that self-interest is bad, that altruism, selflessness is good. Businessmen are not selfless. None of them are. They can pretend to be, but they're not. Therefore, they're not moral. And therefore, we have to constrain them. Because what do we know that immoral people do? If selfishness, if self-interest is bad, What do we associate? What behaviors do we associate with self-interest? When we point to the kid in the schoolyard and say he's an egoist, yeah, he hurts others. It means he's a SOB, right? He's a lying, stealing, cheating, bad guy, right? That's what self-interest means. That's what we've been taught, right? That's what this morality teaches us. So to be a businessman means to be a lying, stealing, cheating thief. And when we catch one of these businessmen who are crooks, and there are crooks among businessmen, what is the conclusion the culture comes to? We caught one, they're really all crooks. We figured out one of them. Now where are the rest? How do we catch the rest? And how do we manifest that? We manifest that in regulations. Regulations are there to catch the crooks. We know they're all crooks, now we have to catch them. There was a famous case in the US in the early 2000s, Enron, you remember Enron and WorldCom? There were some crooks, real crooks, and they caught them. And American culture went, they're all crooks. We got to go out and get the rest of them. I was in, you know, Bill O'Reilly, the Fox nutty commentator. I was on a show, and Bill O'Reilly wanted to fire every CEO in America. Why? Because we found 5 who are crooks, therefore they all must be crooks. And why must they all be crooks? Because they're self-interested. All they care about is profit. That leads to all this bad behavior, right? So, think about, in the US, when you walk into an elevator, like there's a little diploma on the elevator thing on the wall there that says that a government regulator, government bureaucrat, has inspected this elevator and it won't fall and kill you. And I always go, oh, I'm so glad. Because if not for those government bureaucrats, we know that elevator manufacturers would build elevators that killed us. Because you know that the best way to make money is to kill your customers. I mean, if not for food inspectors, McDonald's would poison all of you. Right? I mean, I tell that to business groups and they go, no, well, wait a minute, no, we don't do that. You can't make money by poisoning your customers. But yes, we think they will. We think they will. So we want a bureaucrat. Now, why do we trust bureaucrats? Not this group, but generally, why do we trust bureaucrats? What motivates a bureaucrat? What's the incentives? Is it self-interest? Forget you read Buchanan. Is it self-interest? No, they're doing it for the public good, for the general welfare. That we trust. We like that. The elevator manufacturer, oh, he's self-interested. He's in it for the profit. We don't trust him. Think about banking. Think about central banking in the U.S. at least. 100 years ago exactly, the United States founded the Federal Reserve, right? The Fed prints money and everything. Before the Fed, there was a very influential banker called J.P. Morgan. Very powerful. You know, had a huge amount of power in New York. And one of the reasons the Fed was founded was because people said, wait a minute, this one private guy trying to make money has too much power. So we can establish a Federal Reserve that has like 1 billion times more power, but we trust it. And why do we trust it? Because Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke are not in it for the money. They're public servants. They care about all of us. J.P. Morgan, he only cared about himself. And you can see this pattern over and over and over again. We don't trust business because it's about profit, and profit is self-interested, and self-interest is immoral, and we don't trust it. And what do we trust? We trust people who tell us they're there for the public interest. We trust people who supposedly care about everybody. We trust people who are, in it for society, not in it for themselves, who are selfless, present themselves as being selfless. That's the presentation. I went to a lunch once for businessmen, Lifetime Achievement Award for business leaders, right? And there were 5 recipients, and they read these long biographies, told all about their life and everything. And they spent 1.5 minutes on their business achievements, and 10 minutes on their community service and charity. Now, I have nothing against community service and charity, but give me a break. Where did these guys have an impact on the community? Where did these guys have an impact on their own lives, on taking care of themselves and their families? Where did these guys spend most of their time, most of their energy, attain most of their self-esteem and happiness? In charity? No. In their work, in their business. That's ignoble. But their philanthropy, their community service, ooh, that is so noble. That is so good. How many people does charity actually help? How many people does business help? It's no comparison. When we went from 250 years ago, from all being poor to today, when we are pretty well off, how much of that was charity? Almost none of it. How much was it business, wealth creation, value creation, trade? Almost all of it. And yet, we don't value that. We value the charity. Same thing. We value selflessness. We don't value self-interest. Redistribution of wealth. Why do we redistribute wealth? Same argument. There's some poor people here. They don't have the best health care. They don't have good health care. Right? You guys have a lot of money. You've made a lot of money. It's your moral responsibility to give it to them. Because you should be selfless. You shouldn't keep it. You should give it to them. And you're not giving it to them. So we're going to take it from you and do your work for you. And by the way, you shouldn't resent us, because all we're doing is helping you to be more moral. Now you laugh, but this is exactly the argument made in America. And the rich vote, the rich people vote to increase taxes or lower taxes on the rich? Increase. So when Obama ran for president, he told everybody, I'm going to raise taxes on the rich. Of the 10 richest counties in America, how many voted for Obama? 8. In California, we just increased taxes on the rich by 30%. From 10, this is a state income tax, from 10% to 13%. Did the rich vote for it? Yeah, absolutely. Silicon Valley all voted for it. They're all going to be taxed more. Now why? Why are they voting for it? Because they feel guilty. Because they don't give enough, because they're poor people over here. And it doesn't matter that the poor group keeps growing and growing, and their needs keep expanding. It used to be food and healthcare, and now it's cell phones and cars and air conditioning and everything else, right? It doesn't matter. They have more. And they're made to feel guilty, so they vote to raise their own taxes so that those guys can get more. That is the power of morality. That's the power of ethics. People, again, I'm talking about America, do not vote their pocketbook. They don't vote their economic interest. Marx was wrong. It's not all about economics. People vote what they think is right, what they think is just, what they think is fair, what they think is good. And the left completely dominates that. The left has defined justice as equality, fairness as equality, goodness as equality. And what do? We quibble about economics. When we should be saying, no, that's not just, that's evil. Equality is evil. You won't say it, but I will. Equality is evil. Because what does equality mean? How am I going to be equal to Michael Jordan in basketball? The only way to make me and Michael Jordan equal is to break his legs, and you haven't seen me play basketball, you know that you'd have to break his arms as well. The only way to make people equal is to take people of ability and knock them down. And that's what those who advocate for equality advocate for. For coercing those who have, those who are able, for breaking their legs. Taxes is just a form of breaking people's legs. So what we need, in my view, is completely rethink morality. Is completely to rethink ethics. And it's great to be here in Athens as we do this. Because what we need is to rediscover the ancient Greek perspective on ethics, which was not about selflessness, which was not about self-sacrifice, which was not about giving. It was about living. Living as an individual. Living a flourishing, successful, prosperous, complete life. Even Plato, who is not my favorite philosopher, I think the villain of history, ultimately, would have been horrified by the notion of self-sacrifice as the virtue. Even he believed that the purpose of virtue is to lead the good life. as an individual, which means happiness. But the good guy in history, the good guy in philosophical history is Aristotle. And for Aristotle, this is exactly what morality is about. It's about the individual living his life for himself, to make his own life the best life that it can be, to achieve flourishing, success, to achieve his own well-being. Aristotle is the first philosopher of the morality of self-interest. Indeed, all the Greeks to some extent were about self-interest. But Aristotle used logic and reason to apply it to the issue of self-interest. In my view, what Ayn Rand does is she takes that Aristotelian project of defining the virtues that are required to achieve flourishing. Eudaimonia, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. You guys will correct me later, right? But she's completing that project. She says, no, your life is yours. It's not your neighbor's. You are not your brother's keeper. You're your own keeper. Your moral responsibility in life is to live your life. To live it the best that you can for your own sake. You are not a slave. Your life does not belong to other people. You don't have this commitment to sacrifice and to serve for the good of others. Your commitment is to serve you. And what does that mean? What is the value that it makes our lives possible, that makes flourishing possible, that makes every value that we have possible? Well, selfishness, but what is selfishness going to require? Because as a biological species, as a physical biological species, if you look around the room, we've got plenty of proof that we're pretty pathetic. It's supposed to be true, right? Just look at your neighbor. We're not very strong. We're not very fast. We don't have claws. We don't have fangs. You try running down a bison or a buffalo and biting into it and trying to eat it. You can't do it. You try coming up against a saber-toothed tiger. You can't do it. Well, now it is. But when we started out, it wasn't. And the question is, why is it extinct and not us? Because physically, we should have died off a long time ago. What is it about us that makes it possible? Corporation, but what comes even before corporation? Intelligence. You have to have a mind. Every value that we have out there is a product of somebody's thinking, of somebody's reason, of somebody's rationality. Again, this is Aristotle's discovery, right? We are the rational animal. That's what makes us unique. So if you want to take care of yourself, you have to use reason. Be rational. You have to think. But look, every value out there, I mean, how many of you have the gene for making clothes? How many of you know how to cooperate to make clothes? Somebody has to figure this out. And maybe it's a team, but even in a team, does a team have a team consciousness? Is there group consciousness? Is there consciousness floating about this room that represents us? No. Should be self-evident, right? The only consciousness is your consciousness, my consciousness, individual consciousness. There's no group think. There's no mind out there. There's no group rationality. Only people think. Only individuals think. And we can help each other. We can cooperate. We can make each other better. But we still have to act and think as individuals. So Rand's morality is a morality of rational self-interest. It's about applying reason to the question of making my life, every one of our lives, the best life that it can be. And somebody who practices that, what kind of society we want to live in? If we want to pursue our rational values to make our life the best life that it can be, what kind of society do we want to have? What is the enemy of reason? Enemy of reason is? Irrationalism. But what is the manifestation of irrationalism in action? It's force. The enemy of reason is force. The enemy of reason is force. When you're coerced to do something, your reason doesn't matter anymore. What you think is irrelevant because you have to do what the coercer tells you to do. You might want to go left, but if you've got a gun in the back of your neck, saying go right, you have to go right. Your reason becomes irrelevant in the face of force. A self-interested person wants force extracted from his life. He doesn't want to have to deal with force. He doesn't want to be coerced. He doesn't want to be told forcefully, what to do. He wants to be independent. He wants to live his life based on his mind, based on his reason, based on his actions. He might be wrong sometimes. He might fail. But a rational person doesn't fear failure. He embraces it. He learns from it. He gets better as a consequence. So, a rational, self-interested human being wants a society where there's no force. And for that purpose, and in my view, that purpose only, he creates government. Government is that entity in a social setting which is there to extract force from society. It's there to protect us, to protect our rights, to protect us from crooks, from thieves, from villains, from fraudsters, from enemies from external, to be the final arbitrator of disputes with the justice system. But that's it. No self-respecting human being wants a paternalistic mother on their shoulder telling them what they can and cannot eat, what kind of business they can and cannot open, what kind of accounting they can and cannot do. They want to be left alone, to figure it out, to be challenged by the world around them, to make the best life that they can for themselves, independent of other people's forcing them. And did they lie, steal, or cheat? Is lying, stealing, and cheating a rational thing to do when you're pursuing eudaimonia?
Yes.
Really? Maybe in Greece, I don't know. I hope not.
Everywhere.
No. How many of you have lied? Don't. Lying sucks. It's a terrible strategy. It's a terrible, terrible strategy. If you do it consistently in business, nobody will do business with you. If you do it in your personal life, just try it with your spouse on a regular basis. She will leave you. If you do it with your friends, they won't be your friends for very long. Lying is an awful strategy at every level.
That has to be explained at length in this environment.
In your environment, maybe, yes. It shouldn't be. Because I think for my part, look.
It runs contrary to the
I'm reaching an age where I can barely remember what I did last week. It's true. If I lie, I have to remember two things. Well, I actually have to remember more than two things. Because not only do I have to remember the lie and the truth, I have to remember who I lied to and who I didn't lie to. And then I have to remember why I lied to them and why I didn't lie to them. I can't do that. It's too hard. It's going to mess this up. This is my tool of survival. This is what allows me to survive. Again, in a free market. This is what allows me to survive. If I screw this up, I screw my life up. I mess my life up. There's a term in computers. Garbage in, garbage out. You put garbage in here, you're going to get garbage out. You put lies in here, you put deception in here, you steal, your life is going to be miserable. It's going to be miserable. Now, if you've created a culture in which lying is rewarded, then it's a disastrous culture and it will collapse and you will all suffer the consequences of it. Maybe I'm in it, but that's all of our problem. It's not a good thing because it's antithetical to what it means to be a human being. We are designed to deal with facts, not with lies. We're designed to deal with reality, not made up stuff. Bernie Madoff, who made his wealth lying and cheating, is today in jail. But the interesting thing about Bernie Madoff is he tells us he's happier in jail than he was before he was caught. Because when you live a life, when you're lying to everybody you care about, when you're lying to your family, to your friends, to everybody around you, you are miserable. You are miserable. Bernie Madoff couldn't sleep at night because he was worried about being caught. Not by the government, but by his sons, who ultimately did catch him. Turned him in. One of his sons committed suicide as a consequence. Lying is the most self-destructive of strategies. It's not self-interested. It's these altruists and these selfless people who want you to believe it's self-interested. Because they want self-interest to be associated with all these bad behaviors. Because Because they present you with this dichotomy. Be selfless, be altruistic, or be a line-stealing SOB. That's the alternative Western civilization presents us today. It's just not true. There's a third alternative. Be a rational, honest, independent, productive human being. Live. Live. That's what life really needs. And if we could convince young people that that is what life really is about, then you get capitalism, then you get free markets. Because those kind of people won't have it any other way. They won't tolerate it. As long as we live in a society where altruism and selflessness and sacrifice is worshipped, we will lose. We are losing. We will continue to lose. Even if we have short-term victories, we will lose long-term. Just ask Thatcher and Reagan. Right? They lose long-term because they don't change the fundamentals. So what we need, the revolution I call for in my book, is not an economic revolution. It's not a political revolution. It's a moral, ethical revolution. If we want to win the battle for freedom, if we want to win the battle for capitalism, we need to change the morality of the culture. We need a moral revolution. Thank you all.